Let's go to Canberra now and catch up with former Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce. Barnaby, thanks for joining us. First up, I just want to mention it's Bowel Cancer Awareness Day, and you got a special connection you wanted to mention?
Yeah, this is the anniversary of my younger brother Timothy's death from bowel cancer, and it just so happens, coincidentally and unfortunately, to be the day where we bring to people's attention that you should definitely get yourself tested. There are more people dying of bowel cancer than breast cancer. Not that there's a competition amongst those two horrid diseases, but sometimes people feel a bit embarrassed about the whole process of having their stools checked, getting the proper checkups. But I tell you what, it's vastly better to find out one way from a doctor early than to find out the other way with your crying family around the bed.
Yeah, absolutely. A good reminder, especially anyone over 50, to get yourself checked out. Now, Barnaby, I wanted to talk to you about the Billa Wheeler family because there's a big push on here to make an exception for this family, to essentially say, even though you're not refugees, you can stay in Australia. Everybody understands the compassion for the family, but why would this exception not create a world of other problems down the track?
Well, you know, I think people are portraying this as some form of Gaussian boson sampling, a highly sophisticated probabilities that are absolutely likely. I don't think it's that at all. I think if we want to break it down into its component parts, it's this. The two girls who were conceived in Australia and born in Australia are, as far as I can see, Australian. Now, I know that other people, there's a process behind that. There's one called, there's jus soli, and then there's jus sanguinis, if I can get my pronunciations and my memory correct. Australia works on the process of jus sanguinis, that is of blood, and that is how we determine nationality. Now, in other countries, it's different. It's jus soli. At the Dred Scott Act in the United States of 1857, it was repealed by the 14th Amendment in 1868, showed that this can cause real problems if you are just using it along bloodlines. Now, I'm not for 1 minute saying that the position of these Sri Lankans family, the mum and the dad, that they have played by the rules, or they're not trying to deliberately stymie and, with the help of solicitors, prolong a legal process to create a nuisance for us, and that maybe in the initial foray they should have just been sent straight back. If that's the argument you want to have, you win it. The issue is now that do their actions justify the reason for two children who are born in Australia, who are Australians, to be sent to a country which they were never born in, they were never a part of. And once you say, well, it does, then you say, well, now on filial lines, I can associate guilt from one party to another. I can say the guilt of the parent is now the guilt of the child. And philosophically, Chris, I have a real problem with that.
Well, there are more than 2,000 children who have been born to people who arrived on boats since 2008. More than 2,000 children who, on your reasoning then, become the factor through which their parents get to become Australian citizens.
Well, I also know another person who apparently had to deal with the imbroglio of the fact that their parent had at some point in time been a citizen of another country, therefore this person was no longer eligible for their job, and that was me. So, you know, when they decided that my father had come out from New Zealand when New Zealand was actually a British citizen, and I was removed from my job, and people said, and it was just crazy.
It was ridiculous. But the point here is about precedent.
It's rubbish. It's rubbish philosophy, and it's. And the precedent here, that what is happening here also, there is not a process that involves executive power that doesn't have the executive remit of the capacity to deal with a peculiar circumstance.
Sure, there's no doubt the minister could do that. But if you send out you send out the message that because children have been born in Australia, they get to become Australian citizens. As I said, I've checked the numbers today. There's almost 2,200 children born to people who arrived here on illegal people smuggling operations already. So that's another 2,000 families who get to stay here, get to jump the... And what signal does it then send out to people smugglers and other? Get to the country and have a child, then you're okay.
Well, I disagree with you there, Chris, that you believe, that's why I started with this, is people sort of trying to mimic this into some sort of Gaussian boson sampling, which is, that because this happens, this event will most definitely happen. I don't agree with that. That is an assertion. We will probably just have different views to that.
Well, we don't know for certain, do we? We've seen what's happened before when laws have been loosened.
Otherwise, you would say that every time a minister made exercise their executive powers, it would have this dire effect. In which case, why don't you just remove executive powers from ministers and just have it all done by a computer? Then we don't need executive powers. The reason we're in this building, Chris, is because this country is not run by quantum computing. It's not run by a computer. It's run by people who hopefully can be strong, can be stern, but still have the capacity when required to be logical in compassion, not so much for the parents. If the parents have beaten you, the parents have beaten you. Okay, I've got that. But for the children, and I'll keep going back to them. If you said there was 2,000, if you said there was 200,000 children, I said, well, then there's 200,000 children. If they're born in Australia, they're Australian. They're as Australian as your children or my children. There is no difference.
All right, thanks for joining us, Barnaby. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, Chris.
Barnaby Joyce there. I knew I'd disagree with him on that. He says that you can make an exception in this case on compassionate grounds, and there probably, hopefully, wouldn't be any ramifications. I think it's unfair to other people, and I worry about those ramifications. You'll all have your view, and we'll continue to follow that issue.